All right, welcome back everyone to Walking Wednesday. I hope everyone enjoyed their long weekend and has gotten back into the groove of working again. If you're new here, welcome. This is our monthly workshop series where it is part conversation and part movement, kind of like a live podcast you don't have to sit still for. So over the next 30 minutes, we'll dig into some of the great questions you submitted ahead of time. And while we talk, I encourage you to get your body moving. This could mean walking around your office, stretching at your desk, or just standing up and getting those steps in, whatever works for you. And remember, this is interactive. So feel free to drop your thoughts or your questions in the chat at any time. And if something comes to mind later, you can always scan the QR code to send in questions for next month's episode. All right, so let's get moving and dive right in. Each month I get different questions asking about various goals that you each have. And all of it kind of comes down to time management and trying to create happier, more fulfilling lives. So this month we're going to revisit an old topic, which is happiness and how to expand the hours of our day and focus on what matters most. The inspiration for this workshop comes from a workshop I hosted last year based on Cassie Holmes' book, Happier Hour. So to get started, let's start off with what is happiness? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, there are two definitions. One describes happiness as a state of well-being and contentment, and the other defines it as pleasurable or satisfying experiences. This shows us that happiness can be both a fleeting moment and a long-term condition. But how do we reach that lasting long-term condition, the kind of happiness that endures through the ups and downs of life? Well, happiness is deeply connected to how we choose to spend our time. Research continues to show that well-being isn't solely shaped by our circumstances. Instead, it emerges from the intentional choices that we make, particularly how we allocate our time across meaningful activities, such as service to others or discretionary pursuits. Of course, there's always going to be responsibilities we don't particularly enjoy. That's life. This might include our jobs or household tasks or other daily obligations. But the problem arises when these types of tasks consume the majority of our time, leaving very little room for anything else. And the hard truth is, often they become the only thing we make time for because that's what we allow them to be. And so the book Happier Hour by Dr. Holmes offers powerful insights into how we can use our time more intentionally to boost happiness. So as I revisited some of the questions posed for this month's workshop, I was once again struck by how many of us are wrestling with this very issue, how to reframe our day and make time for activities that bring us joy, even in the midst of stress, responsibility, and hardship. And I'll be very honest with you, I am not perfect at this either. In fact, right now I often feel like I'm drowning in life's demands, but I'm trying to take the advice by Dr. Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist and author of Give and Take, who wisely suggests, quote, "One of the best things you can do is call someone else facing a similar problem and talk them through it. When you talk other people through their problems, you come up with wiser perspectives and solutions for yourself," end quote. So that's what we're here for, right? Let's talk through it together. Let's explore how we can create more time for the things that matter and how we can find joy and meaning in our everyday lives. One of the first most important steps Dr. Holmes discusses in her book is the importance of discovering and identifying our values and your sense of purpose. Values are the deeply held beliefs and principles that give your life meaning and shape how you want to spend your time. Dr. Holmes emphasizes that aligning your schedule with your core values is essential to building a life filled with fulfillment and happiness. So instead of letting your calendar or outside pressures dictate how your day unfolds, she encourages you to make intentional choices about how you spend your time, choosing activities that reflect what matter most to you. For some, that might be family. For others, it could be creativity, personal growth, growth, health, service, or achievement might sit at the center of their values. What's important to remember is that everyone's values are going to look different. And that's not just acceptable, it's necessary. We're all unique. And what brings energy and meaning to one person might feel draining to another. But when we can clearly identify our values, we are better equipped to prioritize what deserves our time and how to say no to the things that don't. And this makes most of the discretionary hours we have during our day. Identifying your values also allows you to reflect more honestly on how you currently spend your time. Often there's a noticeable gap between what we say we value and what we actually allocate our time with. And that gap is always worth exploring. As Dr. Holm puts it, quote, when we spend our time in ways that are not consistent, or when we spend our times in ways that are consistent with our values, our hours become happier, end quote. So that's not to say that every hour of every day is going to align perfectly with the values we have, because that's just not life and that's not realistic. But what it does mean is we can start to examine the time we do have and ask, when I do have a choice, am I spending it in a way that supports the life I want to lead? Which brings us to another important distinction. Why focus on values rather than goals? At Employee Wellness, you often hear us talking about goals and the importance of setting SMART goals. But goals are simply a method for enhancing what already matters to you. So if you don't know what your core values are, your goals may feel arbitrary or forced. And in that case, they're going to be much, much harder, if not impossible, to achieve. Worse, these goals might end up using valuable time that could have been better spent elsewhere. And so when our goals are rooted in our values, they become more natural, more motivating, and far more satisfying. So to get your wheels turning about your personal values, we're going to go through a little exercise. This is from her book, and it's called the 5 Whys exercise. And you don't have to stop moving. This is just a thought process, a thought exercise. And so to identify your purpose and values and to define what ultimately drives you, I want you to ask yourself, why do you do the work that you do? Think about that for a couple seconds. Why do you do the work that you do? Typically, when we start with this question, answers involve like making money or parroting your job description. But that's not what pulls you out of bed each morning and what gets you to work. It's not what makes you show up each day. So I want you to take that first answer of why do you do the work that you do and ask yourself, why is that important? Now dig a little bit deeper, and why do you care about that? And even deeper, why do you care about that? And ultimately, hopefully, that answer is your why. Hopefully, as you dug a little bit deeper to your purpose, your values became more clear. Now, we did this for work, but you can complete this exercise multiple times in different aspects of your life to better understand yourself as well as your core values. Once your values become clear, it's time that we take a hard look at our daily life and make sure it's in alignment. Research from Dr. Holmes and others show that people report the most happiness and satisfaction when they have at least 2 hours of discretionary time each day. Interestingly, the same research reveals that the more discretionary time we have, typically more than 2 to 5 hours per day, actually reduces happiness, likely because it leads to boredom or a lack of structure and purpose. So the good news is we don't need to win the lottery and retire early to be happy. You simply need to create a few hours each day for activities that bring you joy and align with those values we're working on identifying. It's important to acknowledge that these hours don't need to happen all at once. Life rarely allows for that. Instead, find ways to blend discretionary time into your daily schedule. For example, if you commute, you might reframe that time as an opportunity rather than a burden. If you value learning, consider listening to an audiobook or podcast during your drive. If connection is an important value to you, then maybe that's a time that you call a friend or a family member. If introspection and self-reflection is an important value to you, maybe you take public transportation and use that time to meditate, journal, or read. We all have the same number of hours in a day, but the way we think about it and allocate those hours can radically change how we feel. And one of the most powerful strategies Dr. Holmes recommends is a weekly time tracking exercise. Using whatever method works best for you, phone, paper, spreadsheet, break your day into 30-minute increments, starting from when you wake up until when you go to bed. And you be very specific. So throughout this exercise, you don't just write work and block that out for 8 hours. Instead, you know exactly what you're doing: attending meetings, answering emails, managing certain programs or tasks or projects. And you do this for every day of the week, since each day may have different demands and rhythms. This exercise can be incredibly revealing. Many of us feel busier than we really are, or we overestimate how effectively we're using our time. Without assessing how we actually spend our hours, it can be difficult to make meaningful changes and to align those changes with those values. But once you have that data, you can start making intentional adjustments and bring your schedules more in line with your value and purpose. Now, here's where Dr. Holtz offers 4 essential reminders. When we begin optimizing our schedules, we often cut out 4 of the most important contributors to happiness: movement, sleep, connection, and service. You have heard employee wellness sing its praise time and time again, but our bodies and our mind functions the most optimally when we spend time moving our bodies each day. Our brain is able to retain more information. Our cells are able to work through its necessary functions to allow for optimal performance, and our sleep is enhanced. Our hormone levels are balanced, and basically we just feel happier. The recommendation is 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day, which means 30 minutes where your heart is elevated and your body is working. Once again, it doesn't have to happen all at once. As we are crafting our day, we need to ensure that we're carving out those 30 minutes of movement, but this could look like a 15-minute brisk walk in the morning and a 15-minute brisk walk at night. It could mean 6 5-minute breaks throughout the day. But either way, we need to be moving our bodies and respecting them by moving them. The second contributor to happiness that we typically cut out when we're trying to craft our time is sleep. If you missed last month's workshop, I encourage you to go back and take a listen to it because I dive a little bit deeper into this topic. But sleep is crucial to our health and happiness and time. In order to operate in top condition and make the most out of our 16 hours of wake, we need to be getting 8 hours of restful, rejuvenating sleep. And yet in our society, sleep is the first thing we tend to cut when we're feeling short on time. But that leads to a cascade of physical and mental health problems that create lasting detriment to our feelings of happiness and joy. So please, please, please do not cut sleep when you feel a lack of time in your life. We simply just need to readjust and reallocate some time. Thirdly, as human beings, we are wired for connection. We need daily face-to-face interactions with others, ideally including some form of physical touch like a hug or a handshake. Science consistently shows that virtual communication, while helpful, is not an adequate substitute for in-person connection. Even 5 minutes of genuine, present conversation with someone we care about can make a difference in our emotional well-being. And ideally, we extend that to at least 30 minutes a day. Now, this connection can easily be weaved into our discretionary time and aligning with our core values. If family connection is important to us, perhaps we blend our 15-minute walks in the morning and afternoon to provide connection and movement. If you have a friend or a partner or kids, perhaps you bring them on your daily walks, and you can even rotate who you go on them with. So you get one-on-one connection with multiple people during the week. Or if your core value is friendship, use your morning and evening commute to connect with friends via phone calls, or maybe you even ride along together to work. If one of your key values is the work you do and the service you provide to your community, that connection could be at work and inviting coworkers or those you serve to walk and chat with you on your lunch break, or setting aside time as a manager or a supervisor and having an open door policy that allows you to chat and get to know those you work with on a deeper level than just deadlines and projects. There are ways to weave that need of connection through and into our everyday interactions, but it's incredibly important that we find time to create those meaningful relationships. Another critical and often overlooked element of service or of happiness is service. And this is where we're going to spend the rest of our conversation. Over and over again, research consistently shows that when we focus on helping others, we actually experience a paradoxical effect where we feel as if we have more time in our day, not less. This may seem counterintuitive. After all, service requires energy, planning, and often time we already feel short on. And it might not seem as urgent as getting in a workout or eating well or prioritizing sleep and connection. And yet the impact of service on our overall well-being is both profound and measurable. Studies conducted by psychologists like Cassie Mogliner, who is a behavioral scientist at Wharton, reveals that people who spend time helping others report a greater sense of time affluence, the feeling that they have more time available in their day. In one notable study published in Psychological Science, participants who spend just 10 to 30 minutes helping someone else reported feeling like they have more time than those who use that same time to do something for themselves or to waste it. This isn't just a trick of the mind, it's a reframing of perspective. When we take a few minutes to serve, we step outside of ourselves. We momentarily shift the spotlight away from our deadlines, our stressors, and internal monologue. In doing so, we remember our connectedness to others and to the broader community. That connection has an anchoring effect. It grounds us in purpose, it refocuses our priorities, and it gives us a tangible sense of contribution that is deeply satisfying. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time or be formal or structured. Service doesn't have to mean signing up for a weekly volunteer shift at a nonprofit, though it certainly can, and that's a powerful way to give back. But service can also be something simple and spontaneous. It might look like paying for coffee for the person behind you. It might mean offering to help a colleague on a project when they're stressed, or holding the elevator, or giving a stranger a sincere compliment. It could be listening, truly listening to a friend who's had a hard day. The point is not the scale of the service, the point is the intentional act of kindness. When we engage in what research calls pro-social behavior, which is voluntary actions intended to benefit others, we activate part of the brain associated with the reward and connection, including the mesolimbic pathways, which releases dopamine and oxytocin. These are the very same feel-good chemicals associated with exercise, laughter, and affection. Neuroscience shows us that helping others doesn't just make us feel good emotionally, it makes us feel good biologically. There's even a name for this effect, and it's called the helper's high. First coined by psychologist Alan Lux, this term describes the euphoric feeling people often report after performing acts of kindness or helping someone in need. His research found that regular helpers reported significantly lower levels of depression, greater calm and self-worth, and even physical health benefits such as lower blood pressure and reduced chronic pain. But service does something more profound than just give us a temporary boost. It reinforces one of the most basic human needs: to matter. When we give to others, whether it's time, energy, attention, or resources, we affirm our place in the social fabric. We recognize that we are not just consumers of time and space, but we are contributors. And this sense of purpose is one of the most potent ingredients to lasting happiness. And there's something else. Service provides perspective. In the moments when we feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and as if we have nothing left to give, we may be tempted to turn inward and isolate. It's natural protective instinct. But sometimes the very thing we need to do is to look outward, to gently lift our eyes from our own stressors and notice who else is around us that might be struggling. That's not to negate our pain and certainly not to shame ourselves for feeling it, but to expand our lens. Helping others can remind us that we're not alone in facing challenges and that life is both heavy and beautiful, difficult and redeeming, that we are part of something larger. In fact, studies published in journals like the Journal of Happiness Studies and the American Journal of Public Health consistently confirm the link between volunteer and improved mental health. In one large-scale longitudinal study, researchers found that people who volunteered regularly had lower rates of depression, higher levels of life satisfaction, and even greater longevity of life than those who did not. These benefits were especially pronounced in individuals over the age of 40, suggesting that service may become even more essential as we move through life's transition and seek renewed purposes. But this is not just a long-term strategy. Even one act of kindness per day can significantly increase our sense of well-being. Researchers at the University of British Columbia found that people who performed random acts of kindness for 10 days in a row saw sustained improvement to their mood and satisfaction. These acts don't need to be grand, holding a door, writing a thank you note, giving up a seat on the bus. What matters was the intention and the consistency behind it. So now that I've given you all of the science to try and really drive in the topic of service, I am encouraging everyone, especially when life feels overwhelming, to try and incorporate one small act of kindness each day. Not to add more pressure or create new obligations, but as a tool for perspective and joy. Even if it's just offering a sincere compliment to someone you encounter, sending a message of encouragement, or simply choosing patience and compassion in a tense moment, these micro acts accumulate, they ripple, and over time, they shift not only our mindset, but our sense of identity. We begin to see ourselves as givers, as people who make the world better in small but meaningful ways. And to help you integrate more service in your life, we are offering several opportunities this month with Employee Wellness where you can contribute back to the community and in the process, nurture your own happiness. We have our annual food drive, which is currently underway with 6 drop-off locations across the county, as well as an option for monetary donations if you prefer to give financially. We're also holding our annual blood drive with 6 different dates and 5 locations to make it accessible for those who are willing and want to donate. If you would like a more ongoing commitment, we highly recommend you consider volunteering for the county's Meal on Wheels program, where we deliver hot meals to seniors in need. Or if you enjoy being active and involved in local events, we're seeking volunteers to assist with the corporate games and help with substitutes for our events. Every single one of these roles play an important part in making our community healthier, stronger, and more connected. We know because science supports it, and serving others and engaging with our community has a measurable, powerful effect on happiness and mental health. So that's why we're encouraging you to participate. We also want you to feel a greater sense of agency over your time, to realize that when life is stressful, you can still make choices that bring you joy and meaning to your day. And serving others shifts our focus outward. It creates that sense of connection, not just with those we help, but with ourselves. Because when we act from our values, we reconnect with who we are when we're at our best. So during this month, we're also offering WellSteps points in all forms of volunteer participation, as well as for completing the Get Involved in Your Community Quizio. These incentives are designed not just to encourage action, but to celebrate the small intentional steps that can lead to lasting happiness. Because at the end of the day, happiness isn't about avoiding responsibility, nor is it about having endless free time. It's about making intentional, values-aligned decisions with the time we do have. And one of the most fulfilling, purpose-driven ways we can do that is by showing up for others. So let's not just count our hours. Let's make our hours count. But that is all I have for you today. If you have questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. I also, give me 2 seconds, I'm going to throw all of those volunteer opportunities. I have links to each of them, and they are all listed in the chat as well. And then, as always, don't forget if you have questions to scan that QR code and submit them for next month. But until then, be safe, be kind, and be happy.